I got all I want, and I got all I need, and I got everything. I got you and me. All I want, I got all I need.
Marriage is the best. This week I was struck by what a blessing it is to be able to see so many different marriages at work each week. Not only just in my practice for couples counseling, but also in my individual counseling. I run into lots of individuals who either are married and struggling, they might be married and thriving, they might be looking for marriage, they might be at the tail end or at the end of a marriage, whether through death or through the end of the current relationship. So I just get to see so many different kinds of people and so many different phases of the relationship, phases of the marital process. And it's a blessing. It's a huge blessing to me to be able to sit with different people from all sorts of different walks of life and just get to kind of come alongside them, walk with them through whatever is their kind of primary thing, bringing them in. So many people are really struggling with the system, whether they're just really hurt in it, they're feeling kind of broken. They themselves are just broken people from past or from family or from mental health. I run into people stuck in blame who are struggling to work through their own difficulty in forgiving their partners, in working through their hurts, and are just kind of feeling stuck. I walk into a lot of rooms where people's families come up, and the family system, the impact that their family system had on them, either growing up or just generally speaking. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating to get to see so many different kinds of systems and the impact of those systems on real people living their real lives, doing their best to kind of move through life as they are currently, and hoping that it will get better. Because, in the counseling realm, that's kind of what we're all about. We want to aim at making things better for these people. And I love it. I think it is so much fun. I often am sitting in my office just kind of elated to get to sit with different people, and whether we're talking about suffering or grief or different marital systems or family systems, it really is an engaging and enjoyable time to just sit and hear people's stories. And, not that many people get to understand this many stories at this level across a lifetime. And I'm coming up on that. I'm actually coming up on a 10,000 session mark in my career, which is kind of fun. It's fun to think that I've sat with, not 10,000 people, but sat in on 10,000 hours, more than 10,000 hours worth of people's stories and people's lives. And it's a blast. Marriage is one of those systems that is really is a result of the individuals bringing in their stuff, and then with the task essentially of creating this new system, a new system that doesn't look like the system that they inherited. I can't tell you how many times I talk to married people who tell me either horror stories or just stories of families that they want to kind of move away from. I hear a lot of stories where the individuals that are making up this new system are saying, my parents did it this certain way, whether it, within all sorts of different contexts and all sorts of different content areas. that they now feel the need to create a new system, brand new system where their children won't have that inheritance, right? They'll have a different inheritance. And it's fascinating to sit with people and to hear what they kind of drew from that, whether it be positive or negative. That, the fact that they drew this really negative experience around the finances or around time and attention and energy from the father figure, or how money and finances how money talks came about, whether it be working systems. I've actually had quite a few conversations recently where the working system, the system of the people's careers involved in the home, are tearing them away from the dynamic at home. And, obviously that has a huge impact on the marital system, whether you're present in it. It's funny, as a system, marriage has certain parameters that it requires, that in order for it to run well, you kind of have to exist within the parameters. And, you think of like, you have to be committed. You have to commit to this one person. The parameters of like living together or sex before marriage, marriage really does demand a sacrifice there. And if you want it to run really well, then making sacrifices, waiting early on in your relationship, waiting for living together and waiting for sexual intercourse until later on in the relationship, actually really blesses the marital system. It does require support from either like mentors or family or friends or some sort of community. A friendship. The friendship part of it, right, is really, really important. The parameters of like you want to be really, really good friends with the person that you're tying your life to, and you're going to need to be able to sustain that friendship over a long period of time. And a culture of appreciation is another thing that like really blesses a marriage. There is a minimum kind of requirement too of time and input that marriage demands. Marriage kind of demands daily kind of inputs, connections, conversations, like the 20-minute conversation that we talked about. It requires time for fun and connecting away from distractions and, children and phones and all the other distractions that are so prevalent in our world. Requires a lot of self-sacrifice, putting yourself away, putting yourself down. And the marital system doesn't really care. It's kind of apathetic to like how we feel about it, right? The system requirements don't really take into consideration how busy we are, how many kids we might have, what sort of hobbies we enjoy, what line of work we're in. The marriage system requires us to input into the marriage a minimum standard, a standard of connection and pursuit and intentionality, a standard of forgiveness and repair and pursuit. I probably said that twice, but that's okay because that's appropriate. And so with that minimum standard that we're kind of required to put in, if we fail to kind of submit ourselves to the demands of what marriage is and what it requires of us, then we set up our system in order to fail. So I run into systems all the time, right? I run into all sorts of different individual systems and marital systems. So some marital systems that I run into are really strong. And a lot of them have a kind of sacrificial nature to them. They are very much team-oriented, and they are incredibly committed to one another. Most of the time, the people inside of them are also kind of mature, and they are working to continue to grow and build themselves as individuals up. I run into some marital systems that are really selfish, that are given to alcoholism and drug abuse and drug use in order to escape the stress of life. Unfortunately, when the system creates, when the system is like so stressed and overwhelmed that people are turning away from the marriage and to other coping mechanisms and other stress reducing mechanisms, and aren't pouring in enough to the marriage, then the system, doesn't meet its minimum kind of standard, its minimum requirements. I run into a lot of marriages that are fresh and kind of new, and and have characteristics of the individuals involved, right? So many of the marital systems that I run into are deeply impacted by the anxiety of one or both of the partners. Usually it's one. It's interesting because I don't run into very many where like both are anxious all the time about each other or toward each other, but definitely one or the other. There's so many different kinds. There's so many different types. I run into lots of widows. I run into people who, are really struggling with engaging their partner, with drawing them out, right? With they're basically just feeling like their partner isn't willing to put in the work to pursue and to connect and to engage, and so they feel like they're putting in all the work, and it's a struggle. It's a really serious struggle. I run into marital systems that are strained because of selfishness and strained because of disconnection. I run into a lot of marital systems where stress kind of reigns as a driver against. Stress is one of those things that tears marriages apart over time, especially if you don't both individually have a way that you manage your own stress so that you don't allow the stress to come out against the other person, or to kind of take you out of the game, where you're taken out of the game because you have to go and deal with your stress. And when you don't have a system for taking care of your individual stresses, then all of a sudden that obviously greatly impacts the marriage. So developing individual stress coping mechanisms and effective mechanisms of coping with life in the day-to-day will really bless your marriage because then you can show up. You can like show up and be present. You can show up and support. You can show up and engage. So you definitely need those as another one of those parameters, another one of those requirements for a strong, or for a marital system. I wouldn't even say a strong marital system, but just like a healthy marital system, maybe you could say. I run into a lot of people who are longing for a marital system to begin. And that's an interesting one because, the marital systems that I touch base with and connect with have so much suffering in them for such a wide-ranging myriad of issues and struggles. But also there's this struggle of singleness that really it's a serious level of suffering as well. Like not on top of, but it's a similar dynamic of suffering wrapped up in a completely different package. So the suffering that the individual faces is their own. It's sometimes based on what is missing from their life, and it is oftentimes lamenting and fearful, right? Of like, I'm never going to get to that place. I'm never going to get to this marriage place. And whereas the marital system is oftentimes lamenting the fact that like what's in the marital system isn't working, the minimum requirements, minimum standards aren't being met. And so that's a huge amount of suffering. And then sometimes, the suffering is life just really beat us up and our plates are so full that making time and staying connected and being friends and having fun together just kind of fades away, goes by the wayside. Some marital systems I'm finding are a little bit demanding from the side, not demanding, but they are requiring individual work. That's actually something I find all the time. So let me see if I can kind of like capture that for you. Sometimes I run into marital systems where one of the individuals, or even both of the individuals, are in need of acknowledging themselves before they acknowledge the marriage. So a system stuck in blame requires that the person acknowledge themselves, where they are, how they're stuck in that blame, the hurt that they're carrying, and working through all of that before they can then look at the marital system. The individual system is compromised, and so the marital system can't be really, really appropriately or adequately worked on without first addressing that individual system, because the blame system in the individual undermines any ability to work in the marital system. That would also, we've talked about abuse and how abuse also kind of undermines one's ability to work in a marital system. So you can't have both. You can't have this abusive spouse and then use the principles that make marriage work and the minimum requirements and the necessary parameters that like build up a marriage over time and sustain it. You can't have abuse and closeness in friendship. You can't have abuse and the abuse, I think, undermines what marriage is. Like definitionally, the ethos around it, the logos, like what this thing is. Abuse is the opposite of marital friendship, of appreciation, of connection, and so it requires an individual to do their own work, to understand themselves and to see themselves really clearly. These systems are really quite complicated. Some individual systems are stuck in old patterns that they inherited from their parents. And that's an interesting one to break through, because it takes a lot of time and presence of mind and awareness and effort in order to break out of a system that you inherited from your parents. Those parental systems, parental models of parenting, models of neglect or abuse or alcoholism, models of anger or conflict, or models of just like not doing, not investing in the friendship. If you didn't ever see that done, then you may not even know or understand that marriage requires that of you. And so how are you supposed to do that and do it well when you don't have a model for it? And back in the day, I did a marriage and mentoring, and that we talked a little bit about how we kind of need models. We need models and mentors and people to look up to kind of show us the way. And I think that that's really important in a marital system, is to have somebody that's come before you that you can look up to, that you can have conversations with, where you can share ideas with, that will allow you to understand a new version of the marital model and achieve a different model than your parents kind of handed down from you. In a marital system, it kind of requires us not to be immature or to give in to unhealthy patterns or habits. Drug addiction, porn addiction, criticism, contempt, demanding, defensive, emotionless, emotional. We as individuals have so much responsibility for how our marital system looks, works, grows. And in order for us to craft healthy marital systems, we also need to be willing to do our own individual work. to be mindful of ourselves, of where we're falling short as individuals, and to lean into the work that needs to be done in order for us to learn and grow. And by doing so, we also are able to then enhance our marriage system and how that runs. So yeah, the marriage system is a fascinating beast. It's so interesting to run into so many different kinds of marriages, different kinds of people, different kinds of struggles, and to just sit with them, acknowledge the struggle, and work through what does it look like to overcome, what does it look like to heal, what does it look like to move beyond, move past, what does it look like to forgive, what does it look like to do all of these things that marriage really requires of us. Marriage is a demanding little beast. Marriage is she just wants, and she wants so much from us. The marriage system, this idea of marriage, that just requires so much of us. And I think that when we are willing and able to see ourselves clearly and do the work that is required of us in our marriages, we have the best opportunity for growing ourselves into the kinds of people that we want to be. And so when we're faced with these challenges, when we're faced with these demands, when marriage comes knocking at our door, when we're tired and stressed and overwhelmed and disconnected, to lean in to our spouse and our partner is exactly the opposite of what us as individuals in our individual system really want to do. But marriage requires it of us. And when we're sick and when we're tired and when we're in pain, marriage requires that we still seek to serve. And when we are overwhelmed and unable to, function, marriage requires our partners to step in and step up and connect and pursue and sacrifice as well. And so we have our work cut out for us to craft healthy, long-term marital systems, marital friendships, marital connections that can weather the storms of life and that intentionally submit to this idea that marriage systemically requires of us so much. And when we allow ourselves to submit to that and we lean into that and we accept the fact that our marital commitments means something specific needs to give in our time and our energy and our effort, we and our marital systems and the marital systems that we're passing down to our children are going to be the kinds of systems that are hugely impactful to both the individuals in the marriage, in the community and the culture around that marriage, in the towns and the cities and the states and the et cetera, et cetera. When we have strong marriages, we have strong communities and strong families, and it's a powerful and important and worthwhile thing to continue to choose to pursue. So we bless you and encourage you to continue to lean into your marriages. We bless you and encourage you to continue to see your spouse in the best of lights and pursue them. If you want to check out some of our other episodes, we've talked a lot about marriage and systems and the requirements therein. We've talked about 20 minutes to save your marriage. We've talked about date nights. We've talked about nights away and how the sustainable system of our marriages does require us to make lots of time sacrifices to maintain our friendship with our spouses. So if you have any questions or concerns or feedback, feel free to message us, send us an email, shoot us a text if you have our phone number. And there's also a phone number that we use for voicemails and such. So you could leave us a voicemail. We are always encouraged when hearing your feedback. The other thing that you can do is you could leave a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple. If you want to write a little ditty on Apple, that'd be fantastic. We'll read it on the air and you'll get your words blasted out there to all of the audience. yeah, we appreciate you. We hope that your marriages are blessed, and let us know if you have any ideas or insight or opportunities for interviews into the future. This is the end.
All I need, and I got everything. I got you and me. All I want, I got all I need.
I run into Nope. Thanks and have a good one. This is not a phone call.